Welcome to DPC Pediatrician. We're Dr. Phil Boucher
and Dr. Marina Capella, two DPC pediatricians who are on a mission to share our love of direct primary care with you.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of DPC Pediatricians. Today, we're going to tackle a little bit of a challenging topic, or at least one that gets asked about a lot, and that is, can you serve low-income families within direct pediatric care? It's definitely something that I thought a lot about when I opened my practice and prior to even finalizing the decision to open my practice, because if I look back at my trajectory and my why for medicine, a lot of it had to do with serving underserved communities. And so that was really important to me and my purpose as a physician. And so it's something that I really thought about a lot. And it's a hard question because I would say the answer is yes and no, and you have to kind of be creative about it. And it also depends on your community. I have been able to figure out ways to serve low-income families in some ways, but not in every way that I would like to. So I'm curious, and Phil, I'm going to put you on the spot first. How would you answer this question? How or have you been able to serve low-income families within your DPC?
I think I'm much like you. Like, this was really on my heart when I was thinking about it, because I think there's this misconception that DPC is just for rich people and that like the parents are just going to be really needy and they're just going to want high touch points and for you to cater to them. And I mean, it couldn't be more further from the truth. Like, when we've looked at our patient panel, we have 500 some patients. The vast majority are not wealthy. They're middle class, two working parents. They have a high deductible plan, and then they, can do the math and realize the benefit. We have lots of nurses and teachers that are members of ours. They're not all just wealthy people. And so I think that's one of the misconceptions, is this is just for rich people or something like that. When it comes to serving those that are low income or that have special needs or those sorts of things, like, that's really important, I think, for most pediatricians, that we don't give those up, because some of those are the most important cases and the ones where we're able to see our benefit most acutely, that we're able to help those families. And so we figured out it in a couple different ways. One is sliding scale. And so that's just really straightforward. Like, if people go to our website and they look at our pricing, there's a little click button there that says, if you are lower income and are interested, click here. And then they fill out a little information. We keep 20% of our patient panel as sliding scale. And so that's just kind of something that we've stuck to, is here's sliding scale. And we don't have them submit pay stubs. It's truly just the honor system. We say, okay, do you need 30% off, 60% off, or 90% off in order to make this work for you and your family? And they pick that. And then as long as we have 20%, we just continue to offer that and give those discounts. What we do so that we don't get stuck and we can keep continuing to offer those discounts is every quarter we'll say, hey, you're at 90% off. Would you be able to, are you in a place now to go to 60% off? Or you're at 60% off. Could you go to 30% off? And so that allows us to then gently say, we have offered you this discount because you needed us in that time. Is it possible for you to move up a little bit, pay a little bit more? And a lot of parents do that, and they're happy to increase because, for one, their financial situation may have changed. And two, even if it hasn't, maybe they've realized the value that we offer and can realize, okay, this is definitely worth what we're paying and more. And that has allowed us then to keep that open and offer that. And I'm actually surprised that more people don't take us up on it. And so that's one thing. The other thing that we do is free care. Like, charity care is something that we do. There's some families that can't pay and that we've established some sort of relationship with them, or honestly, they just made a good case on the phone and yeah, just come in, we'll take care of you. There are some families that don't have insurance that we're able to help, either, because they're self-employed or they're not in the country with their papers, or illegally, we're able to help in those situations where a traditional clinic might not be able to serve them, or would only be able to serve them at an extremely high cost. Like, if you think about, if you don't have insurance and you need a checkup for your 2-month-old and vaccines for your 2-month-old or something like that, way over $1,000 to get those things done in a traditional clinic where you're just paying cash for it. We're able to figure out ways to help serve those families in a very different manner and provide that level of care to them. And we actually do have a lot of patients with Medicaid that come to our practice and pay the regular fee because they do the math and realize that the value exceeds the cost for them, even though it's a monthly cost that they wouldn't necessarily have to bear. They realize, okay, they can get us in quickly. They're responsive. They avoid unnecessary appointments. This gets me to work more easily so that I can not be stuck at home with a child all day that has a fever that I just need to get them in to get them checked out or get them cared for. There's lots of ways that, parents justify in their minds why they would spend money out of pocket when they could not do that because of what we offer. And so those are some of the ways that we serve, like in the same sort of way that a traditional practice that takes commercial insurance and that takes Medicaid does. The other thing, and I feel like I'm going on a long spiel here.
Go ahead.
Now, as I've gotten going, is we're able to serve in different ways that a traditional practice, because of the demands of insurance on the number of patients that you have to see to keep the lights on and the employees fed and all those sorts of things, we are able to do some things that traditional practices just don't have the bandwidth for. When I first opened, we were in the heart of COVID and things were rough and teachers were having a really tough time. So we were able to set up, use our McKesson account to buy a bunch of N95 masks, and teachers could just stop in and grab them as they needed because they weren't getting enough at school. I mean, that doesn't seem like something that should have to be done. That seems like something that schools should provide, but they didn't. So that was a need that we were able to fill. Shortly thereafter, there was the formula shortage. And so what we did was we opened up a formula bank. Parents, we asked parents, raid your cabinets. If you have extra formula that you don't need, bring it in. And parents then could come and pick it up if they said, my kid needs Gentilese or my kid needs Nutramigen or 360 or whatever it is, come and get it from our office. There's no charge or anything like that. This is just goodwill, but there's a lot of formula that's just sitting in cabinets from babies that don't need it anymore that we can help to redistribute that to people in need. Two other things that we do. So there's a local big foster agency, and one of the federal regulations is that they need a physical within 48, 72 hours of entering the foster care system. Usually they're coming from a different part of the state, or they don't know who their primary care is, or they just can't get in with their primary care. And so we've said, we'll do those. We don't charge them for them or anything. We just do it from goodwill. But those kids then come in, we do their foster physical, we get them set up. If they need follow-ups and referrals, we can kind of help to shepherd that along with the help of their primary care, if they're nearby or not. And so that's another way that we serve. And then one other thing that we've done is catch up physicals. So there's Head Start daycare in town that's federally funded. And one of the mandates is that they stay caught up with their physicals. Well, a lot of these families have issues with transportation, with timing of getting into appointments when they're working, all of the other snags that go into that. So what we've done is we've gone to the daycare center, met the parents there, done their physical at there, made sure that they're up to date so that they're getting the health care that they need. And also that the daycare is able to, stay federally up to snuff when it comes to all the check boxes that they have to check. So those are some different ways that we've been able to serve families. And the last one that I'll say that I just thought of is we helped start a breast milk bank. So for families that need breast milk, if they need donor milk, if somebody has a ton of donor milk and they want to donate it, they can donate it through us. And if they need breast milk, they can come and get it through us. Or we've partnered with it's a local center called the Malone Center, but it's for low-income women and children. They actually have a van that delivers donated breast milk to moms and babies where they live. And it's kind of funny. It's they kind of leaned into the milk theme with some cow sort of branding on the vehicle and the milkman arriving sort of thing. So that was kind of fun and interesting. But that's another way that we're able to serve that a typical practice usually doesn't have the bandwidth, interest, or ability to do, where parents can come. There was just a mom this morning that came in, they have to get blood drawn before they can be a breast milk donor to the milk bank. So we kind of set that up and draw their blood and send it to the lab and all those sorts of things. So that's another way that we're able to serve low-income families in another way outside of the typical practice and outside of the typical routine baby care that somebody can provide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do have a question for you though, and I'll touch on it too. But when it comes to, a lot of us have, bleeding hearts, and we went into medicine because we want to help people. And then we end up,
for sure.
We can run into the trap of undervaluing ourselves and not making the business financially work in order to try to give too much discounted or free service. In the beginning, I definitely was guilty of that. I set my prices too low. I was, not bringing in nearly enough money to keep my business afloat. And if our business does not stay afloat, then we can't help people. And so you really need to make sure that you're thinking through, charity care or discounted rates in a wise fashion. So you, for example, you set a limit on 20% sliding scale, right? So that probably helps to ensure that your business model overall still works. But what else would you say to that point? How is it that you're able to make sure that your business is going to continue to thrive as a business while still doing these things to help out your community?
Right. I mean, I think that is so important too, because you can give away everything and then not be able to serve anybody. And so the 20% was rather arbitrary and just felt like a good number to say, especially because most of the practices in town have, between 10 and 15% of their patients are Medicaid anyway. So we were trying to do as well or better than that ourselves. From a business perspective, I think being in the community does help to drive new business into the practice too. So the milk bank, the formula bank, those sorts of things get our name out there. And so not only are they able to help parents in need, but they do shine light upon our practice and get more media attention and all of those sorts of things at the same time, especially like during the formula shortage. We had so many patients that reached out, and not just our patients, but just people in the community that needed formula because the shelves were bare and they couldn't find what they needed. And so that was really one where it helped shine light upon our practice. The foster care one too, the Head Start one has led to a partnership with doing autism evaluations for the Head Start Center, which has been a really good opportunity for us to help with autism diagnoses and make revenue from the autism evaluations, because Head Start pays for them rather than putting the burden on those families. And so
nice.
I think those things come back to you. And sometimes you don't know how it's going to play out. That wasn't in the bucket list, but then they said, hey, we saw that you guys do these. Can you do them for us? So not all those things, like there isn't always a good business justification for it from a numbers sense at the beginning, but then they do come back to you in different ways that you don't anticipate or realize. I mean, we've had patients that have joined now that said, we didn't join before, but you helped us at your old office location when we needed some formula. And then when it was time for another baby, we're like, oh, let's go to them for our new baby, because we kind of learned about the practice. And so when you give back to the community in those ways, I do feel like it just comes back around one way or another that you can't always anticipate.
I love that. Yeah. So it all plays in together eventually. So I love that.
Yeah. Or it just puts good vibes out there in the universe.
Yeah, that's true.
Good vibes come back, something like that. That's what I at least try and tell myself. What about you? I mean, how did that decision go for you when you were starting out, and what does that look like for you in your practice?
Yeah. To be completely honest, it was a little bit of a leap of faith. I just kind of felt like, you know what, my heart is pulling me in this direction. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I don't know how I'm going to manage to serve low-income families exactly, but I have faith in my ability to figure it out and to be creative and to be open to opportunities, just like you have been. So I opened, and of course I marketed myself as an integrative pediatrician, doing not just conventional medical care, but offering some complementary modalities as well. And I just kind of waited, and I was not great in the beginning. I was pretty slow to grow. But people started finding me, especially people that were interested in a more holistic approach to health. And so I was attracting a lot of middle class and some upper class families. But I tried to also put myself out there in the community. I attended some community events. I even did a swap meet once where I was offering like ear piercing and like anemia checks. I tried to find ways to connect with members of my community, especially the Hispanic community, because that's where I'm from. I'm fluent in Spanish and bicultural. So I tried to ask myself, okay, how can I, make myself known to members of that community as well? And I did gather sort of this small population of families who are either uninsured. Some of them can't get insurance because their families are undocumented or their children are undocumented, or they have insurance, but they've had difficulty accessing care in the way that they need it. So I do have maybe like probably, 10 or 15% of my panel that falls, within those categories. And I offer discounted rates if they need them, like you do. And I think they just love the level of care that I'm able to give as a DPC pediatrician, and also the linguistic connection too. I think that makes a huge difference for people. Some of them have opted not to join as members, and I've allowed them to do just a fee for service type agreement. So they just know that they're going to pay a certain amount each time they come in for a sick visit or for a well child. And I'm okay doing that because I know that the psychology around money, when you don't have a lot of it, can get complicated. And it's very unique to each family and each individual. And so the idea of paying for something that you're not using when funds are very limited is hard. And so that's why I kind of allow certain families to just continue on a fee for service basis, because I know that works with their money psychology and their situation. And I grew up in a situation that was economically hard. And so I knew that every penny mattered, and my parents would never have paid for something that they felt that they weren't using. And so I've kind of adopted that mindset as well. Although, I'm not in the same situation I was growing up, but I know that everyone has a different psychology around money. And that definitely affects even the people who choose DPC, because some people can have all the money in the world, but they still don't choose DPC because of their specific money mindset. Whereas other people don't have as much money to spare, and yet they really value and they understand the model. And so they're willing to put their money there. But I guess that's also getting to another question that we get about DPC is like, why is it that some families that I thought would follow me from my old practice don't, and others that I never thought would follow me do? And I think a lot of that just has to do with psychology, and everybody has a different way of thinking about money.
Yeah, I think that was one. We're moving a little bit away from the original question, but I think that's a really good point is when you open, you're going to be surprised at who follows you and who doesn't from your other practice. And you're going to think they'll definitely come with me. They will totally get it. And then they don't. And then you're like, wow, I can't believe these people, because I thought they were having financial troubles when they talked to me before, but they're right here, on day one to sign up. And I do think that there's a lot of psychology that we just don't understand, or that maybe we haven't ourselves communicated very well what the offer is, that for whatever reason, they've decided that it's not for them. And I will say, like 2.5 years in, I still have patients that I saw 2.5 years ago that are still making the decision and switching over like 2.5 years later. And it's not like that they didn't believe in me or like me then and like me now. They just didn't realize the value or didn't see it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, just the other week, I know we're getting off tangent a little bit.
That's okay.
But a mom had signed her child up and then had texted and said, I have this unusual situation. I don't know if you can help me at 7:00 at night. I was just sitting in my car while my kid was doing soccer practice, and I called her. We talked it through. She's like, oh my gosh, if I had known that this is what you offered and what it was going to be like, we would have switched on day one. And it was definitely not a money thing with them. It was just an understanding the value, or having the psychology behind, well, why would I pay for something that I'm not using? And then on the flip side, I'll pay for Netflix and Hulu and YouTube TV and all these other things that, like, I don't use the Netflix as much as I should to justify the cost, but I do pay for that convenience every month. So I think it just takes some people a lot longer to realize the value of that accessibility and convenience and closeness that comes in DPC, that it just takes a while for them to realize that.
Yeah. And then circling back to the question, there have been other ways that I've found to serve the low-income community. One of the major ones is that I stumbled on a relationship with a local company called MyCare, and they help families. They're sort of a middleman that helps families connect to the medical care that they need after they've been in a car accident. And they were desperately looking for a Spanish-speaking pediatrician because they largely serve the Latino community and Spanish-speaking community. And so they reached out to me. They said, hey, like, we'll pay you a certain percentage of the claim amounts. And so at first I was hesitant because I was like, I don't want to fill out claim forms.
Paperwork. That sounds terrible. I was trying to get away from all the paperwork.
Exactly. But I said, you know what? This is an opportunity to serve this community. That's really important to me. It's one page that I have to fill out, and then I have to send them a copy of my note. So it's just the claim form and the note. And it doesn't even get processed through the really, really nitpicky health insurance companies. It's getting processed through the car insurance claim. So they just want something that shows that this kid received medical care, right? And so this company, acting as a middleman, pays directly for the medical care. And then they have to wait probably, 6 months to a year to get paid out by the insurance company. I just sort of believed in their their desire to help this community and in what they were doing.
Right.
And so I started seeing patients for them. And it's actually a wonderful relationship. The paperwork is a little bit painful, but I've trained my office manager how to do that. And so she takes care of that now. But I get to see these kids who have been in car accidents, and they usually did not sustain any life-threatening injuries. Otherwise, they would have gone to the hospital and been hospitalized and all that. But I'm seeing them a few weeks after the accident, and they're having nightmares, or they're complaining of back pain or neck pain, or they're just not as active as they used to be because they have some sort of physical complaint. And I'm able to practice clinical hypnosis with them and myofascial release therapy and use these other, alternative and complementary modalities that I love using. And it helps the kids so much. And I see them about 6 or 7 times each, just to make sure that we've worked through all of those issues. I can see them longer if they have a more severe case. And I just love doing that. I love being able to exercise those different skills with this population, and also be serving what tends to be a much lower income population. Most of them are on Medicaid or uninsured. So I love doing that. And that's been a good relationship to build.
I knew you were going to talk about the hypnosis because I remember that from your talk at the PEDS DPC Mastermind, and how that related to the car accident insurance evaluation. So I'm glad that you brought that up as another way to serve families and make a huge difference that you wouldn't be able to do in a traditional practice. Like you would not be able to do that in a traditional practice at all. Like that just wouldn't compute with a traditional practice. So it's something that they desperately needed, that you're able to do, that you find professional enjoyment in and financial enjoyment in.
Yeah, exactly. I had to figure out, how to charge appropriately for it. And at first I was trying to do these like hour-long sessions, and then realized actually my initial visit can be an hour, and then my follow-up visits can be half an hour. And that's worked out really nicely so that I can not lose too much income if they're not showing up. And then also just make sure that financially it works out for me. But yeah, those are some of the ways that I've been able to figure out how to serve both middle-class families, upper-class families as well, and many lower-class families. So it's worked out more easily than I realized it would in the beginning. I was definitely fearful that I would not be able to figure it out. But if you open your mind, and if you're willing to just be creative and partner and put yourself out in the community, you can find ways to make it work.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I learned. And I think that, gosh, I still have some former colleagues that will call it concierge care. And it's really worth telling people this is not concierge. This is direct primary care. Concierge is different. You pay for access, and then they use your insurance, and it's thousands of dollars per year. Direct primary care is low fee, monthly fee, no insurance hassles or anything along those lines. And so I think making that distinction clear to patients, especially if they've been told what your care is like, and making sure that they understand the actual cost, because most people think, oh, concierge care, that must be like $5,000 per year. And they bill my insurance. That's just outside of the ballpark. I'm not going to look into it. No, this is direct primary care. It's very different, and it's focused on building relationships, not just squeezing you for more money to get access to me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Although I will also support some of the pediatricians in our DPC community who do choose to use that term of concierge, or they'll call themselves concierge style care. And that's okay too. It depends on your community, but I tend to side with you, Phil, in terms of like, I try not to use that term because again, it evokes this feeling of like, oh, that's only for wealthy families.
Right.
And again, it depends on your practice area and the population that you're targeting. There's nothing wrong with targeting a higher income population. If that's what you want to do, no judgment from us there. But, regarding this question that many people have of, can I serve lower income families? Yes, the answer is yes. And I know one pediatrician in Indiana, she does call herself concierge, and she targets this like higher income population because she lives near a boarding school. But she's told me in conversations, and she's, shared at conferences, that she also gives free care for people,
Right.
for Spanish speaking families in her community. So she's not necessarily advertising that because she has to limit the amount of that she does. But whatever population you primarily serve, you can also do other things to kind of give back if you want to.
That makes me think of one other thing, and then we'll wrap this up, I think. But the idea of having your families that are not under financial strain, that have resources. We usually know who's who when it comes to patients because we form those good relationships. Having them sponsor other families is another avenue. We haven't done that. We haven't really explored that. I think that there's some, at least if you wanted them to be able to get a tax deduction, you'd have to start a 501c3 and all those sorts of things. But there's certainly practices out there that do that, like patients that realize the value of what we offer and are more financially, set up right now. Would you consider sponsoring a low income family to be a part of this that has specific needs? I mean, that's something that is certainly worth exploring too. We just have never really given it much exploration, but that's something that you could also consider as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, hopefully this has helped answer the question, if you had it on your mind, of can you serve low-income families within direct primary care? The answer, I would say overall, is yes, but it might take being creative and fostering relationships in your community. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great week.